my name is Brooke and this is Maker's Workshop. Today I'm going to be making a wooden laser cut backpack. Let's go! A couple months ago I had made a wooden laser cut handbag, and since then I've wanted to make this backpack because I think it would be a fun expansion on the same concept. And if you would like to make this as well, all the digital files that I'm going to create in this video are going to be available on makersworkshop.com so that you can do that. All right, let's go. I want to go for a classic backpack shape here. That shape can basically be broken down into two parts. There's a taller back section that's the main compartment with the big opening at the top that's rounded over, and then a smaller, stouter front section. For this front section, I'm going to just go with a version of the Living Hinge handbag that I designed previously with slightly different dimensions. And then to create this back section, I'm going to start with a long, narrow rectangle and then add a living hinge to the center section so that it can be bent over with box joints to secure it to a square front and back piece. There's two main things I'm looking out for on this first version. First, I want to make sure that the basic shape I came up with looks and feels like a backpack, which I think it does. And the second thing is that those living hinges are giving the wood enough bend. That's annoying. I think I'm also having a bit of a project existential crisis. Like, who wants a wooden backpack? Because it's wood. Usually with the living hinge, you are worrying about making things more flexible. In this case, I want to dial my flexibility back. Firstly, I am just going to shorten the overall amount of living hinge on this backpack. And then secondly, I'm going to use the same orientation of cuts, but I'm just going to spread them out a little bit more so it has a lower density of cuts, so to speak. And then on the front of this backpack, I have two pieces of plywood that are directly on top of one another, which feels kind of redundant. So I'm actually going to morph these two pieces into one piece. I think that that will be a much more elegant design. And then the last tweak is adding a semicircle to the back panel so that it closes up the back part of this. The design changes I made at this phase really made an impact. I thought that the silhouette of the bag drastically improved between these first two versions, and it was now time to hone in on the actual functionality of it.
How does this part open?
Okay, so what I was planning, a solid semicircle of wood, a piece of leather on it with a snap.
Okay.
Sorry, with the magnet I mean, so it like opens and then closes.
You don't think that's like hard to see?
Yes, it's very hard to see, but I don't know how else to do it.
I think you should make this part fixed, but I think that this piece should flap up.
Yeah, and then I can just put a magnet there, so it just opens. That's such a good idea.
You do a magnet,
okay,
or you could do one of those like tie things.
I like magnets, but yeah, I think that's such a good idea. Duh. And then this, like you said, then that can be stiff.
Yeah.
That there can be stiff, and you just snap it. That's such a good idea. Okay, thanks. You're the best. With a couple of little button clicks, I could split this top piece into two pieces on Illustrator. I thought that was going to be like an eyesore. Like I thought it was gonna catch my eye in a bad way, and I don't feel that way at all about it. I think it kind of blends in nicely, which is really exciting. Yay, okay, cool. And then I guess I just need to add a bottom to this, and yeah. To get a bottom to fit into this, I needed to add box joints to the bottom edges of all the existing pieces, and then also do a little bit of math to figure out the magic puzzle piece that would then fill in that hole with box joints on the bottom. Additionally, at this point, I started measuring my magnets, sketching where I wanted those positioned on the piece, and then adding pockets for them into my design, along with stitching holes for accent leather. I cut my last prototype in more birch plywood, and then puzzle pieced it all together. There is chance that I got it wrong. Okay. What do I need to do? And I don't know if you can tell just from the clips of the laser cutter going, this took me more than 2 versions, but I'm just gonna gloss through this. We got there. It still needs changes though. It's like little finicky box joint things that I wonder if the camera's even gonna pick up. Like there's a little gap there that doesn't need to be there. And same there. And then I think that this closure, I don't want to use rectangular magnets for this closure because it's going to be really flimsy. There's just not that much wood there. So I think I'm going to make this side closure have a couple of smaller circular magnets instead of the rectangle. And then I think it's there. Okay, so 5 versions. But that's okay. 5's my lucky number, so I'm okay with that. And then it was time to cut this design in my final material. Any 1/8 inch thick hardwood will work for this. The important thing is that it already has finish on it and it has a masking material securely on there to protect that finish from smudges in the laser. I'm using proof grade walnut from Glowforge to save myself some time, but again, you can prep your own material here as long as you just do those things. I carefully removed all of the masking material, and the result is clean walnut faces with a crisp line to blackened laser cut edges. It looks great. And then it was accent leather time. I picked out a taupe color that I really liked the color and texture of with the walnut, and then I also tossed in this aqua blue because I liked it and it was kind of fun. I'm using painter's tape as masking material here over the leather. And also, it's important to tape this leather down to the bed. This keeps the leather laying flat so it doesn't catch on the laser head. It's a small but actually really important step not to miss. And the pattern I'm cutting here is essentially just a cropped section of the wood pattern so that the leather is gonna fit perfectly over that outer walnut shell. All right, so I need to start thinking about the lining now for this front pocket. And I'm just gonna use the same exact concept that I used for the lining of my laser cut handbag that I did a couple months ago, but I need to obviously tweak the dimensions so that it will fit into this front section. And call me naive, but I think I can get this in one shot. I'm gonna cut I'm gonna cut it in chipboard first, fold it up and just make sure it's good before I cut it my final material. But I did so many of these, so I think I got this.
Nope.
Yes! Fits. Once I knew my pattern was the right size, I could go ahead and laser cut this in some black leather. I'm using waxed thread to hand stitch this together. I positioned 2 rows of stitching holes on either side of where I needed pleats. I folded right down the middle of those pairs of stitching holes, and then I'm just doing a simple running stitch along the length of each pleat. Came out looking something like this. All right, they look great, but I had an epiphany as I was sewing these because I saw this piece of leather draped over the backpack, and it has this really beautiful silvery lining. This is just the right pick, so I'm gonna redo that, but in this one. On the silvery leather, I switched to a light gray thread and repeated that same process. Only this time I had a little bit of practice. That being said, the laser cut stitching holes made this really easy to do. The only trick here was being sure that I folded each pleat in alternating directions to make an accordion shape that will lay nice and flat to then stitch onto the larger section of lining. Next, it was time to get the accent leather stitched onto the walnut shell. I'm using a metallic embroidery floss to do this. I'm threading this from behind into the leather and then taping the end off with painter's tape, not tying it. From here, I'm doing a plain old running stitch again along the length of the edge. When I get to the end, I'm wrapping my thread around and back up through the last hole. This lines me up to fill in the spaces left as I continue with that same running stitch going the other direction up the same seam. I'm going to keep going until all the holes are filled. On the last stitch, I'm not going all the way down through the wood, I'm just going through the leather, and like magic, I'm gonna end up right next to that tail I had previously taped down, and I can tie these 2 ends together in a double knot, and it looks great and is nice and secure. I'm repeating this on both sides of the 2 turquoise leather sections. The turquoise is on the bottom half of both closures. The taupe leather is next. I cut these to wrap all the way around the walnut shell so that I can slip my magnets into place between the rows of stitching. These magnets will end up sewn in place and there's no way they'll move on me. I think painter's tape has been the unsung hero of this process. I think I've gone through an entire roll of painter's tape, at least. The other side of each magnet closure is going to require glue. I'm letting the matching magnet fall onto its corresponding magnet that's sewn into the leather already. I'm immediately putting tape on the side that isn't going to be glued down to avoid getting confused. I'm filling this engraved section with a 2-part 5-minute epoxy and then firmly pressing the magnet into place. This stuff sets up nice and quickly, about 5 minutes to be exact, and I could pull off my tape. You'll see the leather pulling up here too, which is to be expected. I'm using a piece of scrap wood to softly press the edges of the leather into the sliver of spilled over epoxy around the magnet's edges, and this will hold it down. I repeated all of these same steps for the 2 round magnets on the side of the bag for the over-the-top closure, but I didn't film that part. I was really liking this aqua leather and I wanted to add in another panel of it on this front spot here. So I quickly did up a design and got it cutting. Like I said before, this wood already has finish on it. To get as solid a seal here as possible, I am going to remove that finish and rough up the surface, just using sandpaper for this. From there, I'm going in with a moderate coat of wood glue. I want full coverage here, but no overspill. I carefully lined this up as perfectly as possible and applied pressure while it dried. While that glue dried, I set my attention to figuring out the back loop. I designed and laser cut a leather strip with more of those stitching holes. I just went in with a power drill and a bit that's the same diameter as those holes. But parallel to this, I added these holes into my vector file, so the next time I make one of these, they're just handled on the laser cutter. But the power drill totally worked just fine. And then I stitched the top loop into place the same way I've been doing, and I'm using the more durable waxed thread here. It's time to start thinking about this front liner now. And I really keep going back to the idea of gluing this into place, because I think it'll lay really nice and flat if I do that. But if I get it wrong, I think it'll wreck the whole thing. So I'm a little bit nervous, to be honest, and I'm just trying to think through if there's something that I'm missing as to why this is a bad idea. But I think it's a good idea. The hard part here is that I need this glue in the exact right spot. The living hinges make easy guidelines to go off of to keep this nice and square though. And then I used more painter's tape to map out exactly where the leather was going to be making contact with the solid wood. And then I just stressed my leather. And then again, I needed to stress the wood as well. And I also went in with an awl just for good measure to really scratch this up, and then you always gotta sign your work. Using a foam brush, I applied a thin but even layer of wood glue and then went ahead with it. A wiser person than myself would have probably Googled all of this before starting, but I Googled the wood glue leather combo after I did it, and turns out I did do it right, so that's the good news. And it was on there like a rock. So the second half of this glue up here is trickier, and there's just not that much leather that's making contact. I will say a really important subtle detail here is I cut down some scrap wood to stuff in between each pleat, so I have something rigid to press against when it's time to apply pressure to this glue as it dries. There isn't a magic trick here besides going very slowly and very carefully mapping out exactly where the glue goes and exactly where the materials need to be distressed. This is by far the most stressful part of this so far. I hope that worked. I really do. The top flap of this, that's directly below the living hinge, needs a little bit of wiggle. Also, it can't be glued down anyway because that would interfere with the living hinge. So to attach this, I just poked 2 holes in my leather lining and then used a stitch into one of the metallic stitches, just one kind of loosely done on both sides, and that worked out perfectly. And then I could take out my scrap wood, and the front pocket was finished and looking great, if I do say so myself. Today's assembly day, and here's the kicker. If I were to be like replicating this, I would probably glue the wood first and then add all the like stuff to it, but because I was designing this as I went, I didn't glue it because I wanted to be able to just change one piece at a time of the wood if I needed a redesign as I went, which I think was a good decision, but it's gonna make this part a little bit more stressful. Titebond 3 is key here for a couple of reasons. First things first, it's fully waterproof, which we need because it's a backpack. And secondly, it gives me a bit more dry time, which will be very much appreciated here because this is gonna be a pretty finicky glue up. It's so small and I can't really have smudges because I can't really sand them off. I'm first assembling this with painter's tape to line up where I need to glue my front panel first. The bag itself here is going to make sure that these 2 pieces get clamped together in the exact right position. If this is even a little bit off, it's gonna complicate getting the other pieces properly into place. That had at least 15 minutes of clamp time. So it's not dry yet, but I can take the clamp off. Okay, where do I start? Pretty straightforward. Each tab here gets a little bit of glue, but I needed to be really careful because I can't really easily sand off any glue that gets smudged. I don't want glue on my leather and so on. But I did keep water on hand because I took a second at the very end to just wipe things up. And then after double checking that my top hinge was still nice and glue-free, I let this sit for a couple of hours just for good measure. This is a big moment. So I want to get something on the bottom here on the interior because if there's stuff in a bag, it's going to be pressing directly against that glue joint that I just did. So I'm going to actually design a little liner that's going to line it a little bit because I don't know how much material I have, but more importantly, it's going to reinforce it. There's been so much digital design in this video. I'm just going to kind of breeze through this, but basically, it's gonna look, oh no. It's gonna look like this, and then it's gonna push in. So I'm gonna go do that right now. Okay. I quickly whipped this design together and then cut it out of brown leather. Using the same gluing method as I've used a million times, and at this point in this video, this just unfolds into the interior of the backpack. I'm using a squared edge of a scrap wood to press down and effectively burnish the leather into the sharp edges on the interior, and for an extra seal on the very outer rim, I actually went in with an epoxy on the leather here. I'm not really sure why, but it just felt like the thing to do, so I did it. The lining honestly doesn't look perfect, but I thought it was good enough on the interior of the bag, and it felt really durable, which was more important to me in this case. And then I could thread some strap material into place. I'm melting the edges to prevent fraying and hand sewing each strap into a loop. And then it was finished. This actually is plenty of space to hold a lot of stuff in between the two pockets. I actually think it would make a great lunchbox or something like that. And the front pocket has a really nice snap to it, which I don't know about you, but that's important to me. Woo! I am so happy with how this came out. It had its frustrating moments, I've got to be honest, but it was well worth it because, for starters, I think I'll actually use this on a day-to-day basis instead of a handbag, sometimes, especially in the summer. And I have the digital file now, so if I ever wanted to duplicate this, I could do that really quickly and efficiently. Or you can, because like I said, it's going to be on makersworkshop.com. So if you want to give it a go, you can get the files there. All of these fit on a Glowforge. I know I used my big laser, but all the individual pieces I did design so that they would fit on a Glowforge bed, because I know that that's a bit more accessible for most people. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.